This airline's really lowered its standards." "Anyone can get on now," a businessman sneered, glancing at C-22C, where a woman in a faded hoodie slept, slumped against the window. The cabin laughed, dismissing her as a worthless nobody. But, wait, what if they were wrong? Stay with me. This story's about to take a wild turn on Thread Tales. Her name was Olivia, 29, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, just a face that didn't beg for attention. Her gray hoodie, worn thin at the elbows. Her jeans, patches of faded blue. Her sneakers, scuffed, laces frayed. She held a small fabric tote close, like it was her only anchor to the world. The flight, a standard commercial run from New York to D.C., packed with people who thought they were somebody. Businessmen in tailored suits, VIPs tossing back overpriced drinks, flight attendants gliding through with tight smiles. Olivia didn't belong, not in their eyes. They saw her slumped in economy, her tote tucked under her arm, and figured she was just some broke nobody who lucked into a cheap ticket. The cabin hummed with their chatter, their side glances sharp, like she was a smudge on their perfect little world. She'd been dozing when the businessman's voice cut through. His name was Greg, maybe 45, with a suit that screamed Wall Street, and a watch he flashed every chance he got. He leaned toward the guy next to him, some slick-haired finance bro named Derek, and didn't bother keeping his voice down. Olivia's fingers twitched on her tote, just a tiny movement, but enough to show she'd heard. Derek smirked, adjusting his cufflinks, and muttered, "Bet she used her last dime for that seat." A few rows up, a young woman with glossy highlights, and a phone glued to her hand was live streaming to her thousands of followers. Her name was Kay, early 20s, the kind of influencer who thrived on attention. "Guys, look at seat 2 to C," she said, angling her camera. It's like, does she even know where she is? Total bargain bin vibes. Her chat exploded with laughing emojis, and the cabin rippled with snickers. Hold on, what happens when the truth flips everything you thought you knew. Keep watching, because Thread Tales is about to reveal a secret that'll leave you speechless. Olivia didn't stir. Her eyes stayed closed, her breathing even, like she was floating somewhere far from their words. What? A woman in a sleek navy dress, mid-30s, sat a few seats ahead, her posture perfect, her nails manicured. Her name was Claire, a corporate consultant who carried herself like she'd never lost an argument. She turned to her colleague, a balding man in a pinstriped suit, and said, "I bet she's one of those charity cases the airline lets on for PR." Her voice was loud enough to carry, and a few passengers nodded, smirking. Claire flipped her hair, her earrings catching the light, and added, "It's almost offensive, sitting here with us." Olivia's hand paused on her tote, her fingers brushing the zipper, but she didn't look up. The cabin's laughter grew, a low hum of agreement, like they'd all decided she was less than them. Claire's colleague chuckled, whispering something back, and the two shared a look that said they owned this space, not her. Across the aisle, an older couple in designer clothes whispered to each other. The woman, Ellen, had a diamond bracelet that glinted every time she moved. Her husband, Richard, kept checking his phone, probably tracking stock prices. "She really doesn't belong here," Ellen said, loud enough for nearby seats to hear. Richard nodded, not looking up. "Probably got on the wrong flight," he added, and they both chuckled, their voices dripping with superiority. A flight attendant named Mark, tall, with a buzz cat and a name tag pinned too straight, walked by. He set a plastic cup of water on Olivia's tray table, slamming it down harder than necessary. As Claire said, she was a nuisance, a nobody taking up space. Olivia's hand shifted slightly, brushing the cup, but she didn't open her eyes. The cabin kept buzzing, the judgment settling over her like dust. "Hey, if this story's grabbing you, take a quick second. Pull out your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Thread Tales. It means everything. To share these moments, real stories of pain, truth, and strength. Let's keep going together." The plane cruised steady at 35,000 feet, the sky outside a pale, endless blue. Then the captain's voice broke through, sharp and tight. "Folks, we've received an unidentified warning signal. Please remain calm." The cabin went dead quiet for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. People twisted in their seats, pressing faces against windows. Phones came out, filming clouds like they held answers. A guy in a polo shirt a few rows back shouted, "Is it terrorists?" His voice cracked and panic spread fast. Greg gripped his armrest, muttering about suing the airline. Kay zoomed in on the chaos, whispering to her livestream, "This is wild, you guys. What's happening?" Ellen clutched Richard's arm, her bracelet digging into her wrist. "We should have taken the jet," she hissed. Olivia opened her eyes.
Oh.
They were dark, steady, like she'd seen worse storms than this.
Oh.
She leaned forward just a fraction and whispered, "Not terrorists. They're here for me." Her words were soft, barely audible, but Greg caught them. He spun toward her, his face red. "Who do you think you are, saying stuff like that?" His voice boomed, pulling every eye in the cabin. Kay's camera swung to Olivia, her giggles sharp. "Oh my God, she's lost it." An older woman in a cashmere sweater, sitting 2 rows ahead, turned around. Her name was Margaret, the kind of lady who carried herself like she owned the room. "Don't stir trouble, dear," she said, her voice sugary but cold. "Just sit down and be quiet." The frat guys in the back, 4 of them in matching hoodies, started filming too. "Crazy lady in 2 to see," one yelled, and they burst out laughing, their phones shaking. Mark, the flight attendant, strode over, his jaw tight. "Ma'am, stay. Quiet, or we'll report you to security when we land." His tone was final, like she was a problem he'd already solved. The cabin roared with laughter, feeding off the moment, turning Olivia into a joke. A man in a tailored blazer, probably a tech exec named Paul, leaned over from the row behind. He had a smug grin, the kind that came from years of closing deals. "You know, if you're going to make up stories, at least dress the part," he said, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. He gestured at her hoodie, her sneakers, like they were evidence of her worthlessness. A few passengers snickered, nodding along. Paul leaned back, crossing his arms, satisfied with the attention. Olivia's fingers curled slightly around her. "Tote," but her face stayed still, her eyes fixed on the window. The laughter grew, a wave of it rolling through the cabin, like they'd all agreed she was nothing more than a punchline. Paul's grin widened, and he whispered something to the woman next to him, who laughed even louder, her voice sharp and grating. Olivia didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her hand rested on her tote, fingers still, but her eyes locked on Mark's for a split second. "Report me," she said, her voice soft but clear, like a blade slipping through silk. 2 words, and the laughter stumbled. Mark blinked, caught off guard, then turned away, muttering something about protocol. The cabin settled, but the air was different now. People kept glancing at her, some annoyed, some curious, like they were waiting for her to break. She didn't. She leaned back, closing her eyes again, her tote still tucked close. The plane hummed on, but the tension hung heavy, like everyone was holding their breath for what came next, in the quiet. A woman in a bright red coat, maybe a PR exec named Vanessa, stood up to stretch. She glanced at Olivia, her lips curling into a sneer. "Some people shouldn't be allowed in public," she said, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough to carry. She adjusted her coat, making sure everyone saw the designer label, and tossed her hair. "It's embarrassing for the rest of us." A few passengers murmured agreement, their voices low but sharp. Vanessa sat back down, crossing her legs, her heels clicking against the floor. Olivia's hand paused mid-motion, adjusting her tote strap, but she didn't respond. The cabin's judgment was a living thing now, wrapping around her, daring her to react. Vanessa smirked, pulling out a compact mirror to check her lipstick like she'd just won something. Then it came a low, guttural roar, different from the plane's engines. Heads whipped to the windows. 2 F-22 Raptors, sleek and gray, sliced through the sky, their wings so close you could see the rivets. Screams filled the cabin. Fighter jets. Kay's phone shook as she zoomed in, her live stream exploding with comments. The frat guys pressed their faces to the glass, one shouting, "This is some action movie shit."
Ow.
Ellen's bracelet clinked. As she grabbed Richard's hand, her voice shaking. "What is this? It's happening." Greg was already typing on his phone, his email to the airline half-written demanding answers. Mark froze in the aisle, his radio crackling, but no words. "Coming." Olivia opened her eyes slower this time. She looked out the window, her lips parting just enough to let out a quiet breath. The jets moved like they were part of her, their rhythm steady, familiar, like a heartbeat she hadn't felt in years. A few rows back, an old man in a worn jacket leaned forward. His name was Harold, a veteran with hands that shook from age, but eyes that missed nothing. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the jets. "It's impossible," he whispered. "That's the president's escort squad." His voice was low, but it carried. A few heads turned, confused. Kay's camera swung toward him, but he didn't care. His eyes were on Olivia, like he was seeing something he couldn't believe. She didn't look back. Her fingers traced the edge of her tote, slow and deliberate, like she was counting the seconds until the world caught up. The cabin was a mix of panic and awe now. People whispering, some still filming, others just staring out at the jets. A teenage girl, maybe 17, with earbuds dangling and a backpack at her feet, turned to her mom. Her name was Sophie, and she had that restless energy of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Mom, why is everyone freaking out about her?" she asked, pointing at Olivia. Her voice was loud, impatient, cutting through the noise. "She's just some random. This is so stupid." Her mom, a tired-looking woman named Linda, shushed her, but not before adding, "She's probably just confused, honey. Let it go." The words were meant to be kind, but they landed like a slap, dismissing Olivia as some lost soul. Sophie rolled her eyes, snapping a photo of Olivia for her group chat, captioning it, "Weirdo in 2 to see." Olivia's hand tightened on her tote just for a second before she let it go, her face still calm, her eyes still on the window. Oh, Greg wasn't buying it. He stood, his face flushed, pointing at Olivia. "Don't tell me you think those fighters are here for you?" His voice was loud, mocking, pulling the cabin's attention back to her. Derek, the finance bro, joined in, smirking. Tatusi thinks she's Top Gun. The frat guys howled, one mimicking a plane with his hands, swooping them through the air. Mark stepped forward again, blocking Olivia's path to the aisle. "Sit down immediately." Voice was sharper now, almost desperate. Olivia didn't move. She reached into her tote, her movements slow, careful, and pulled out a silver metal tag. It was small, no bigger than a keychain, but it caught the light. Graved on it was Night Viper 22. The cabin didn't see it yet, but Harold did. His hands gripped his armrests, his knuckles white, his breath catching. The cabin's laughter died down, but not entirely. A man in a golf shirt, probably a real estate guy named Todd, leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, come on. What's next? You gonna tell us you're a secret agent?" He chuckled, looking around for approval, and a few passengers joined in, their laughter nervous but sharp. Todd adjusted his watch, a knockoff Rolex, and leaned back, smug. "Some people will say anything for attention," he added, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Olivia's fingers brushed the tag in her hand, her movements slow, like she was measuring the weight of his words. She didn't look at him, didn't respond, just kept her eyes on the window where the F-22s still flew, steady and unyielding. She held the tag for a moment, her fingers brushing the edges, then slipped it into her palm. She stood, ignoring Mark, and walked to the emergency radio near the galley. Every eye followed her. Kay's live stream was going crazy, comments flooding in. "What's she doing? It's fake, right?" Olivia didn't look at anyone. She pressed the radio's button, her voice steady, calm. "This is Night Viper 2 to see, requesting acknowledgement." The cabin went silent, like the air had been sucked out. Outside, the F-22s tipped their wings, a sharp, deliberate salute. Phones dropped from hands. Kay's stream froze, her mouth open. Harold's voice broke the quiet. "My God." Night Viper was reported Kia 7 years ago. Olivia didn't turn. She pressed her hand over her heart, her fingers tight around the tag. Her eyes fixed on the sky. A woman in the front row, a journalist named Rachel with a notepad already out, stood up, her pen shaking. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice loud but unsteady. "You can't just walk onto a plane looking like that and expect us to believe you're some war hero." Her words were sharp, meant to rally the cabin, and a few passengers nodded, their doubt louder than their awe. Rachel scribbled something, her hands trembling, like she was trying to write her way out of the moment. Olivia didn't move, didn't answer. She just stood there, her tote hanging loose at her side, her silhouette steady against the window. The F-22s stayed close, their wings cutting through the sky, a silent answer to Rachel's words. The cabin was a mess, now whispers. Gasps, some people still laughing, but it was nervous, shaky. A woman in a sharp blazer, probably a lawyer named Susan, stood up, her voice trembling. No, this must be staged. She was loud, almost screaming, like she needed to convince herself. The frat guys muttered, "How could someone dressed like that be a legend?" Their laughter was gone, replaced by uneasy glances. A few passengers still chuckled, clinging to doubt, but it felt forced. The air was thick, like the room was holding its breath. Olivia didn't say a word. She stood. By the window, her silhouette framed against the sky, the F-22s still visible in the distance. Her tote hung loose at her side, and she adjusted it, her movement slow, like she was giving the world time to catch up. A businessman in a gray suit, maybe a CEO named Alan, leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. "If you're so important, why does your bag look like it came from a dumpster?" He pointed at her tote, his tone mocking, like he'd found the flaw in her story. Few passengers snickered, their doubt flaring up again. Alan leaned back, crossing his arms, his cufflinks. Glinting, "This is just some PR stunt, isn't it?" he said, looking around for support. Olivia's hand paused on her tote strap, her fingers brushing the worn fabric, but she didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the window, where the jets flew steady, their presence louder than his words. The cabin's laughter was weaker now, like they were starting to doubt their own doubt. Then came the roar, deeper, unmistakable. Air Force One broke through the clouds, its blue and white body gleaming, the U.S. seal sharp against the sky. The radio crackled, loud and clear. "Night Viper 22, welcome back. We owe you everything."
Passengers gasped and sobbed.
Kay's phone slipped to the floor, her live stream forgotten. The frat guy sat back, silent for the first time. Greg's face went pale, his phone still open to his half-written email. Harold was crying now, quiet tears running down his face. Olivia raised her hand, a slow salute to the sky, her eyes blazing with something fierce and alive. The commercial plane banked slightly, following Air Force One's lead, the F-22s tightening their formation. A young mother, maybe 30, with a toddler, asleep in her lap, looked at Olivia. Her name was Emily, and her eyes were wide, almost pleading. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice soft but desperate, like she needed to know. "Are you really her?" The cabin turned, waiting for Olivia's answer. Emily's hands trembled. As she adjusted her son's blanket, her question hanging in the air, Olivia turned just enough to meet her gaze. Her smile was small, barely there, but it was warm like a promise. "I'm just Olivia," she said, her voice steady, "but I flew for you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged her son closer, her breath catching. The cabin. It was quieter now, the doubt fading, replaced by something heavier, something real. The cabin was different now. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching her, some with awe, some with shame. The reporter Tom, in a wrinkled button-down, stood up. His voice shook as he spoke. "If you're Night Viper, why sit here like an ordinary passenger?" It wasn't an accusation, but it was desperate, like he needed an answer to make sense of it all. A few others nodded, muttering, "No way, no way." The crowd was split. Half wanted to believe, half couldn't let go of their doubt. Olivia turned just enough to face them. Her smile was faint, barely there, but it held the room. "Chose to disappear," she said, her voice steady. "But if the sky calls, I'm still Night Viper." The words landed like a punch, quiet but heavy. A flight attendant named Sarah, is younger than Mark, with a nervous smile, approached Olivia. Her hands fidgeted with her apron, and her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Ma'am, I didn't know," she said, her eyes darting to the floor. "Can I get you anything? Water? A blanket?" The offer was small, but it was genuine, eh? Crack in the cabin's wall of judgment. Olivia looked at her, her eyes softening for the first time. "I'm fine," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Sarah nodded, stepping back, her face flushed with embarrassment. The cabin watched, some passengers shifting uncomfortably, like they were starting to see their own mistakes reflected in Sarah's gesture. The applause started slow, then roared. People stood, clapping, some crying, some just staring at her, like they were seeing her for the first time. Kay was frozen, her phone still on the floor. Greg sank into his seat, his watch suddenly looking too big for his wrist. Harold was still crying, his hands folded in his lap, like he was praying. Mark stepped back, his face red, his radio silent. Olivia didn't acknowledge the applause. She sat back down in two to see, her tote in her lap, her eyes on the window. The plane flew on, escorted by the most powerful aircraft in the world. A man in a polo shirt, maybe a salesman named Jeff, stood up, his face red with frustration. "This doesn't add up," he said, his voice loud enough to cut through the applause. "If you're some big hero, why didn't you say something earlier? Why let us think?" He trailed off, his hands gesturing wildly like he was trying to grab onto his fading doubt. A few passengers nodded, their unease bubbling up again. Olivia didn't look at him. She adjusted her tote, her fingers brushing the zipper, and said, "I don't owe you my story." Her voice was calm, but it carried, silencing Jeff mid-sentence. He sat down, his face flushed, the cabin's applause swelling again, louder. This time, like they were clapping for her silence as much as her truth. Years ago, she'd been someone else, a young woman in a crisp uniform, standing on a tarmac, her hair pulled tight under a flight helmet. She'd been Night Viper 22, one of the best pilots the Air Force ever had. She'd flown a mission to protect Air Force One, taking a hit that should have ended her. The report said Kia, and she let the world believe it. She walked away, left. The medals, the fame, the life. She'd sit in diners, order black coffee, watch people rush by. Sometimes a jet would streak across the sky, and her hand would tighten on her mug just for a moment. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked. She was just a girl in a hoodie, invisible to the world. Back on the plane before the jets appeared, there had been a quiet moment. Olivia had reached into her tote, pulling out a creased photo. It was old, the edges worn soft. A younger Olivia in that uniform stood next to a man in a suit. It was tall, quiet, with eyes that matched her steady, unflinching. Her husband. Nobody saw the photo, but her fingers lingered on it, tracing the edge before she tucked it away. That was the only hint of who she was before the radio call, before the jets. Just a flash of memory, gone as quick as it came. A young man in a hoodie, maybe a grad student named Ethan, sat a few rows back. He'd been quiet the whole flight, his nose in a book. But now he stood, his voice shaking but clear. "I read about Night Viper in school," he said, holding up his book, A History of Military Aviation. "She saved the president. Said she died." His eyes were wide, locked on Olivia, like he was seeing a legend come to life. The cabin turned, some passengers leaning forward, others shaking their heads. Ethan clutched his book, his hands trembling. Olivia didn't turn, but her hand paused on her tote, her fingers still for a moment, like she'd heard him. The cabins. Applause softened, replaced by a murmur of awe as Ethan sat down, his book still open to her page. The plane landed in D.C., and the tarmac was a circus. News vans lined up, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. Olivia stepped off, her hoodie still frayed, her sneakers scuffing the ground. She didn't stop for the cameras, didn't answer the questions. She just walked, her tote slung over her shoulder, her steps even and sure. Behind her, Greg got a call. His face went white. "Fired," he said, loud enough for people to turn. His company's biggest client was tied to Olivia's family. One word, though she never said it, tanned. He was done. Kay's live stream went viral, but not how she wanted. Clips of her mocking Olivia spread, and her followers turned on her. By morning, her sponsorships were gone, her comments filled with hate. Susan, the lawyer, tried to backtrack, posting an apology online, but it was too late. Her firm dropped her, citing unprofessional conduct. The frat guys deleted their videos, but their frat social media got suspended after alumni saw the clips. Mark was reassigned to ground duty, his name whispered in airline circles as the guy who threatened a hero. Claire, the corporate consultant, found her latest deal canceled, her client citing reputational concerns. Vanessa's PR firm issued a statement distancing themselves from her, and her social media went silent. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just consequences falling like rain. Olivia didn't see any of it. She was already gone, walking through the airport, her tote swinging lightly at her side. When her husband arrived, the crowd parted. He didn't need to say much, didn't need to raise his voice. He was in a plain jacket, no tie, but the way he moved said everything. People froze. Greg looked away, his hands shaking. Kay dropped her phone again, her face flushed. Susan stammered, trying to say something, but he just nodded and kept walking. He reached Olivia, and she looked up, her eyes softening for the first time. He didn't hug her, didn't make a scene, just stood beside her, his hand brushing hers. The room felt heavier, like the air itself knew who they were, a security guard. A burly man named Mike approached them, his face nervous but respectful. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low. "We've got a car waiting for you. Orders from the top." He gestured toward a black SUV outside, its windows tinted, its driver standing at attention. The crowd watched, some whispering, others filming. Olivia nodded, her tote still over her shoulder, and followed Mike, her husband, at her side. The crowd parted further, their phones still up, but their voices quieter now, like they were witnessing something sacred. Mike held the door open, his hand shaking slightly, and Olivia stepped inside, without a word. Steps as steady as ever. She didn't need rescuing, never had. She'd walk through their words, their laughter, their doubt, and come out the other side. Not because she fought back, but because she didn't need to. Her truth was enough. The headline screamed about the mystery passenger in 22C. About Air Force One's salute. About a hero forgotten and found. Olivia didn't read them. She was already somewhere else, her tote over her shoulder, her husband at her side, walking into a world that finally saw her. For everyone who's been looked down on, judged for how you look or where you sit, this is for you. You're not invisible. Your worth isn't in their eyes. You carry it quiet and strong, just like she did. You're not alone. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, and let's keep sharing these powerful stories. On Thread Tales,